Coming up today on the show, Ryan Leaf joins me, former NFL quarterback and WSU legend, now NFL analyst and podcast host. He's going to give us his thoughts on Geno Smith, what he saw from him last year and what he expects from him this year, and also the Seahawks and where they fit into the NFC landscape. We'll show Ryan's projections for the entire conference, and he'll talk about how close he thinks the Seahawks are to the top of that conference. He's also going to reflect back on that time that he spent in mini camps in the offseason with the Seahawks under Mike Holmgren in 2002. Really excited about this one. No more beating around the bush. Let's get right to it. Ryan Leaf on this edition of Seahawks Forever.
Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan Viens.
My guest today is a very busy man. You see him everywhere. You see him on the NFL Network. You hear him on Sirius XM. You see him on college football games. He is a motivational speaker, a published author, former NFL quarterback, and Washington State University legend. Ryan Leaf joins the show today. Ryan, thank you for taking some time out of your busy schedule to join me on the show here today.
Awesome to be with you, Dan. My pleasure. Always good to talk to people back in the Pacific Northwest. Miss that place.
Yeah, you're an East Coast guy now.
Yeah, we moved out here about a year ago. Had to get out of LA. I think people probably understand that pretty well. Kids got a lot of space to run around in now. We got like 3 acres out here.
Nice.
I got a library that smells of rich mahogany. So, I think I'm Ron Burgundy pretty well right now. So
is Baxter running around there somewhere in the background?
Oh yeah.
I would be remiss if I also didn't mention the Straight Line podcast that you've been doing. Some excellent analysis work there. You definitely want to check that out and follow that on Twitter if you're not familiar with that as well. I wanted to get your thoughts as a guy who kind of has the big picture, covers the entire league on the Seattle Seahawks. And let's start kind of the quarterback, looking at the quarterback. The big story here, obviously last year, was the resurgence of Geno Smith and the year that he had. Give me your thoughts on what you saw from him last year and kind of what you expect to see from him in year 2 as a starter.
What I loved about Geno last year is there was absolutely no fear. Zero. He was letting it rip. And it was so fun to watch a guy. And I get it. Like, he wasn't going to allow or take anything for granted, having been put on a shelf for the last 10 years or so of his career, that if he got this opportunity, if the gods shined down on him, he was not going to fear a thing. And he let it rip, and it showcased it. He broke the Seattle Seahawks single season passing record, and he had the wide receivers to do so. And then you add Jaxon, and now we're talking about something that could be not only, surprisingly special, but incredibly, legacy defining special there in Seattle. So that's a big thing. Really impressed with him, just understanding the mindset, because to allow himself to be a first round draft pick, a starting quarterback in his mind, to humble himself to be a backup for that long, waiting for another opportunity. I couldn't do it. In fact, I was in Seattle when I was given that opportunity. Yeah. And I walked into Mike Holmgren's office and I said, I'm not your starting quarterback. Why would I play? I didn't understand the bigger picture. Yeah. And so he's really an inspiration in my book. That's for sure.
It's a fascinating perspective that you have on this. And I was going to ask you about your short time in Seattle a little bit later in the show, but you brought it up. Is that ultimately, you went to the mini camps, you spent a good portion of the off season here. Is that ultimately what led you to retire and walk away from the game? Is you just couldn't wrap your head around not being a starter at that point?
That had more to do with my pride of anything. But then I also was really starting to develop a ton of mental health issues around my anxiety, my depression. If I would have been able to walk into Mike Holmgren's office and tell him that, like, say, hey, I'm having trouble getting out of bed. I feel sad all the time. I feel lazy. I was more embarrassed about showing up at camp and missing my target weight and being fined for it. I just couldn't get out of bed. People who have dealt with depression understand that, what that malaise feels like. I didn't understand it. I didn't know what it was. I just thought I was lazy. And so that's what ultimately, made me change my mind. I would have loved the opportunity. Imagine if I would have came in and said that, and he said, let's figure out something, Ryan. Let's go get you the help that you need, taking nothing away from Trent and Matt. But if I do that and I have the right mindset with the talent that I had, maybe I'm the starting quarterback in Super Bowl 40. That's the way I think about it. Maybe as far-fetched as you could imagine, but
right.
You use those opportunities and you look back on them like, I made the wrong choice in just quitting something that I wanted to do since I was 4 years old, simply because of a stigma that existed that made me think I was weak rather than, seeking the help that I needed. But it was pretty cool to watch Matt do what he did there, though. I love that guy. We're friends to this day. There's a good story out there. He got disinvited to the combine in '98 because I declared after the Rose Bowl and they had to disinvite somebody when they invited me. And Maddie was the one that got booted out. But one of the only teams that came to the Boston College workout was Green Bay. And so Mike Holmgren and him rode that for a long, long time.
I appreciate you sharing that. Certainly people that are familiar with your journey and have watched you, from then 2002 to today, you take a lot of pride in what you've done. And as a former Coug, I certainly have. During that short time that you were part of the Seahawks organization, is there a memory or a practice or a workout or a story that stands out to you as a real happy time that you think back on?
I don't know. I think just the relationships I built there in such a short time. I figured out how to be a teammate at the NFL level when it was too late. I went to Tampa, and my short time there, was incredibly invested with those teammates, the guys I've kept the most touch with, and I never played a game for them. Same with my time in Dallas, my work with Wade Wilson as the quarterback coach. Relationships I built there. And one of them was with Trent Dilfer in Seattle. It was, right before he lost his child. And I remember talking to him after that and just, the ability to have the humanity and that connection because we were in a locker room together.
Yeah.
I think that gets lost on a lot of people. So it's not the happiest of stories. I can look back on it fondly now because of the relationship it built, because of the difficulties and how he was there for me years later when my life started to spiral out of control. So I think just, I found some really real relationships while I was in Seattle.
Let me ask you this. That was early on in the Mike Holmgren era here. And of course, Seahawks made their first Super Bowl appearance a few years later in 2005. Could you see the seeds of a championship team starting to sprout there during those few months?
Every team I went to, these are pro football players. It all depends on how things come together. A right piece here, a right piece there, luck, staying healthy, all the things that go into it. I think Sean Alexander was the guy that really just, was a guy that shone out. And then you had Steve Hutchinson, which, I think you had every level of what you needed during that process. So anytime you had Mike Holmgren at the helm, you were the opportunity to be successful was there. And it was interesting to run a West Coast offense for the first time in my life. I was such a down the field thrower.
Yeah.
So foreign to me to just throw it, 2 yards from the line of scrimmage, and matriculate down the field. It just was foreign. You look what Mike Price brought to the table at Washington State. We were the reason why we had low completion percentages because our average attempt was 10 plus yards down the field. That if I was throwing the ball around, within 2 yards of the line of scrimmage or minus 2 yards of the line of scrimmage, where the NFL game is nowadays, that's why we see the completion percentages what they are.
Well, it certainly worked for you in that Mike Price system. I have often told people that season, that 1997 season, your junior year, threw for almost 4,000 yards, 34 touchdowns, that I don't think you made a bad throw that year. Obviously, that's probably a little hyperbolic and exaggeration.
I like it, though. You
might disagree, but just watching every single game that year, as a fan, I don't think you made a bad throw that year. And I don't just mean even the incompletions. Like it was the baseball analogy would be all your swing decisions were good. It was a great year.
I knew the offense like the back of my hand.
Yeah.
You know, I'd been in it for 3 years. I had spent so much time with my head coach, who was also my quarterback coach and my offensive coordinator. I trusted him, and we thought the same way and how to run an offense. And I think that's what everybody got to see that year. Ironically enough, you know, you invest so much in a first round draft pick, and then you fire the head coach in week 5, like they did with me and Kevin Gilbride. And then they decide to go out and get a head coach, and they decide to get one from the Pac-10 conference. But instead of going out and getting a winner or a guy that coached me in an offense that I was very successful at, they go to Oregon State and grab a guy who had never had a winning record at Oregon State before, and bring him in, and whose personality would have conflicted like oil and water with me. And that's exactly what it was. And so it's just always odd to look back at things and go like, why wouldn't you try to set somebody up for the most success for your team when you invested so much money in it, when you had a guy that was right there? I mean, I can't imagine if I would have gone into a game in the NFL and I didn't have to think about a damn thing offensively.
Yeah.
Because I knew it so well. And that's what made Peyton so good. He had the same offensive system from the moment he got in the league with Tom Moore to ultimately with Clyde Christensen and Adam Gase was what he brought to the table. The whole career was running the same offense. That's why he never thought about anything when he was at the line of scrimmage. He just figured what he was going to do and put him in the best possible position. So it's always funny to look back at it in hindsight. And I think, you know, we get to see that when an NFL guy gets locked in with something that he feels comfortable doing, you see a lot of success.
It has so much to do with chemistry and fit. And it reminds me of another WSU situation where my old college roommate, Tim Rosenbaugh, was drafted by the then Phoenix Cardinals. And off the top of my head, I can't remember who the head coach was his rookie year, but they fire him, they bring in Gene Stallings, and those two just clashed from day one. And it was just that marriage was just never going to work. You bring that back now to what we're talking about with the Seahawks, and now Geno Smith in his 4th season with Shane Waldron, I think, maybe 3rd. You know, obviously the continuity with Pete Carroll, and now you surround him with all those weapons. You mentioned Jaxon Smith-Njigba, in addition to Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. That stable of tight ends they have, a young running back room with a lot of dynamic talent and a couple of guys that are really, really adept in the passing game. Talk about what that's like, because you were surrounded by a ton of complementary talents at WSU for sure, with all those receivers with McMichael, McWashington, and Jackson, and Nyan Taylor. What kind of luxury does that afford Geno, knowing every time he drops back in that pocket, he can go anywhere with the football?
I mean, I can't tell you. I cannot believe that Jaxon Smith-Njigba fell to that spot. I mean, I do not know what the New York Jets were doing. You could have done something that the Green Bay Packers never did for Aaron Rodgers, and that's give him a skill position player in the first round. You add him to the mix in New York, I mean, it's already good enough as it is, but they pass him up and I'm just like, what's going on here? This dude is special. He's unique. He's going to be an inside guy that effectively changes what defenses have to do in that division. San Francisco is going to have to change their defense now because of Jaxon Smith-Njigba and what he's able to affect. So if I'm Geno, I mean, he must have been, cloud 9 when that announcement was made that Njigba was going to come to Seattle and be a part of that wide receiving room. Exciting times for the Seahawks. Again, it depends on what they can do defensively, how they can get stops in a division where they're going to need it. But I also think there's a bit of a kind of comeback for Geno Smith, simply because defensive coordinators, they didn't have anything on him. And for as much as you want to be able to do during the season, you're going up the next week against somebody else, and you got to prepare in a week span. Go back and look at when Colin Kaepernick was really exposing teams in the NFC West there with what they were doing. You gave them an offseason. You gave defensive coordinators a complete offseason, and we saw a dramatic difference in what Geno does is what the NFL does. You throw the football. I don't know how much you can really do to limit that, but there are going to be some things that defensive coordinators throughout this league have seen in Geno, and they're going to effectively make those changes and try to obstruct what they do offensively. I think he's good enough to overcome it, but just be aware that I think there could be a bit of a regression early as he finds and navigates his way with a defensive coordinator crew that have, really looked at different ways to slow him down.
And I was going to ask for your thoughts on that, on essentially, I guess pressure is the word. There are expectations this year that he didn't have to live with last year. I want to put a graphic up for those of you watching on the YouTube channel. This is your top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL that you published recently and talked about on your podcast. And for those of you listening on audio, it starts at Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow 2, Hurts 3, Josh Allen 4, Lamar Jackson. Then you go Jared Goff at 6, Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson at 8. I want to get your thoughts on that in a second. Justin Herbert, David Carr. If you were to continue this list on, about where would you slot Geno in?
Let me go to my notes here, because I usually keep everything in here that I put together. So now I can go back and look at what the 10 after that looks like.
This is exclusive content, folks.
Exclusive content, everybody. Where do I have Carr at 10? I must have made a change on some of this stuff.
Okay.
Oh, this is the full NFL. Okay. All right. So I have Geno as the 7th ranked quarterback in the NFC. So he's right there.
Okay.
I want to see it again. I think like anybody, it's like the Jets this year. Everything looks perfectly sound for this team to be Super Bowl champion this year. They just have the Jets systemically have just never been able to do it. And I need to see it. I just need to see it again from Geno. If I do, if he has the type of season that I think he's capable of having, and don't read into it at all, like I think he is not capable.
Sure.
A lot of times my rankings are like, this is what I believe going into the season. I have a high regard for Derek Carr and Jared Goff right now in terms of difference makers that they can make for their teams. A lot of people don't have the same beliefs that I do on that. I think Geno Smith can be a top 5 quarterback in this league this year if he's able to do what he did a year ago and move forward and get better with some better players with that, especially if you get on a winning roll and this team starts to win. And it's very capable. So don't for anybody out there that I don't believe that Geno Smith can be a top 5 quarterback in this league next year.
Yeah. And Derek Carr at 10, I think I said David earlier, it's about the 9,000th time I've made that mistake. You've got Russell Wilson at 8. You're expecting a bounce back year from him.
I am. I do think last year was an anomaly. Not enough has been talked about other than in your guys's, around your guys's locale was the loss of Trevor Moawad.
Yeah.
How that was felt. A lot of people don't know that Trevor had been working with me since I left prison. And in the way I approach my thinking, he changed everything. There's no way I'm here right now, 10 years later, if it weren't for him. And so I know what kind of impact he has. And whatever impact he had on me, it was tenfold with Russell. They were attached to the hip. Russell believes in neutral thinking. Yeah. It's the reason why I think a lot of times fans, media look at him, especially when he was in Seattle, and maybe he came across as a simulation sometimes because of that neutral thinking. It has worked for him. It served him well. Now, I know when Trevor passed away, but when they did their work, it was during the off season. It was all this planning going into it. So last year was really his first year without Trevor. Mm-hmm. And I feel like he overcompensated in many different directions in terms of how he compartmentalized things, how it was viewed, how he went about his business. I had some good conversations with some of his family this off season, and I think they were in an agreement, and they believe there was a response that they had come to a resolution on and how to effectively move forward in a positive direction. And I think you add Sean Payton to the mix. I do think there is a substantial bounce back year this year. I think that team gets to double digits. He's an elite quarterback. He should be a 2-time Super Bowl champion. And it's incredibly, I think, important for his legacy, and he understands that. And he wants to. I mean, the work ethic, the work he put into this year. I don't know if you got a chance to see him. It might be the best shape that you guys have ever
I've seen
seen.
some of the workout videos. He looks as lean.
Yeah.
I don't know 7.5% body fat Ryan Leaf lean, but speaking of weight goals, but didn't miss that the other day. But no, he looks as good as he's looked in quite some time.
Yeah, and hey, he's got a coach that's got his back. I mean, the whole Nathaniel Hackett, BS over the last couple of weeks was all Sean Payton was doing was like, I got my guy. I'm riding with him.
Yeah.
He didn't need to do it. It was unnecessary. He could have done that privacy of the locker room, but Sean Payton's calculating. He does what he needs to do and what he thinks he needs to do. And, people outside the program down there aren't happy the way camp has gone so far in terms of the offensive, uptick. But no, I can't wait for that week 5 game or whatever it is when they come to town, because if the Broncos can find a way to get a win in Chicago in week 4, they could be 3-1 going up against a 1-3 Jets team, and that could be a death nail for the Jets if they can't go to Mile High and get that done.
Want to talk about your thoughts on the NFC as a whole, but one more thing on your quarterback list. I'm curious where you would rank Brock Purdy staying in the NFC West here. He just amazing what he did when he got the opportunity last year. And there are still people who, just like you said about Geno, need to see it again. There are people that are skeptical that what we saw kind of lined up with the skill set that we thought he had coming out of Iowa State. Your thoughts on Purdy?
I mean, there's nothing I can say that he hasn't been able to accomplish. I mean, Kyle Shanahan, put it this way, when it was kind of in doubt on who was going to be the starter because of all the injuries and everything, when I went through the NFC quarterbacks, I said the number 1 guy is Jalen Hurts in Philadelphia, and the number 2 guy is the San Francisco quarterback room. It didn't matter. I don't think it matters who plays. I don't think if Trey Lance goes out there, I don't think it matters if Sam Darnold goes out there or if Brock Purdy goes out there. Hell, you can play him each 6 games this year for all I care. They're going to be successful. Kyle Shanahan puts them in a good position. They've got playmakers, and I don't know if a trade has had more impact on a team's success than when Christian McCaffrey was traded for last year.
Yeah. Talk about a fit.
What they were able to accomplish in the second half against the Seahawks in that wild card game, that's what exactly Pete Carroll is going to be looking at and going, okay, that's where we have to get better defensively. You add Bobby Wagner to the mix. That's a big part of it. Bobby Wagner gets guys on the ground. Getting him back in the mix at a more team-friendly number is the reason why he left in the first place.
Sure.
I think that's a real difference maker.
Yeah, and what we're seeing in camp this year, and Bobby's even admitted it. He said he wasn't 100% his last year in Seattle, and but that we're seeing in camp this year that didn't mean he was falling off a ledge or that his skills were deteriorating. He just wasn't healthy, because he looks as quick and energetic in this camp as he has in a long time, and that's got people around here pretty excited. Here is put another graphic up again. This is your full projection for the NFC. And in the NFC West, you've got the Seahawks mirroring last year's record at 9-8, 2 games behind the 49ers. Is it the questions about the defense that give you pause to give them maybe another win or two?
We do these during the middle of the summer, and you have to let things take shape and form. And I think we're going to do another round of it around the win totals, right before kickoff. Seattle is right there with Atlanta, Chicago, New York. I do believe. I think they're going to be vying. I don't think they win the division, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. So if they don't win the division, they're vying for spots 5, 6, and 7.
Yeah. And
if that's the case, those are the teams that they're going to be vibing with. They may, San Francisco could be as good as, a 15-2 type team. And that could put Seattle in a place where they're 13-4 or something like that. And they're still playing in that 5th spot. And that's just unfortunate when you have such a good team in that division. They would have to climb the ladder and get above them. And it's not unreasonable that they do that. It really isn't. They played them about as tough as anybody that first half in that wild card game. If they put 4 quarters together, it could be a lot different when it's all said and done. So I think that's a very conservative number for the Seattle Seahawks this year.
Okay.
I very well could see them 12-5, 11-6. Unfortunately, being in a position where they'll still be the 5th seed. That's where the NFL needs to change this. They need to change it because the best teams shouldn't be penalized for being in a division where it has a great team.
And what really stood out to me, for those of you who can see the graphic, it's not Philadelphia Eagles that has your pick for the highest win total in the NFC.
Yeah.
You've got the New Orleans Saints at 12-5, best record in the NFC. What is it? Is it the fit of Derek Carr there that's going to put them over the top? What do you like so much about the Saints?
Oh man, I'm so high on Derek Carr. I love his work ethic. I think you finally give him a top 10 defense and you'll get to see he was good enough to get his teams to the playoffs or right on the verge of the playoffs with a defense in the 20 to 32 range each and every year. You give him a top 10 defense with Davis and Jordan and Tyrann Mathieu. This team is going to be tough. The division isn't great. And just go look at and before I did this, I go into it blind. My producers give me the schedules, and while I'm prepping for the show, it's the first time I'm looking at the schedules when I'm going through and the way I go about my business. I look at a game and I go, okay, that's an outright win in my eyes. So I give them 1.0. I look at it and I go, this is kind of a toss-up. This game could go either way, 50-50. It's probably a point spread of 3 on each side or whatever. That's a 0.5 in terms of the win column. So then I add them all up at the end. And when you look at their schedule, just go take a look at their schedule. It is not murderer's row. It is not. And so I had them at 12-5. And then I added up everybody else's and I went, I've sat with the algorithm part of this. I don't gamble. I've never been in gambling when it comes to what I know is the football aspect of things. And it's from a much different mindset. And I went 32 games over 500 last year against the spread. And so if you followed me, you had a good season.
Yeah.
And so I've gone about the same business as I've done it last year. This is I would say this is 70% from a player's mindset to 25% of it being the science, the algorithm, the math of it. And then for me, the last 5 really is just kind of gut. I mean, that's what this comes down to me. And I feel like the Saints team, if healthy, and just today I heard they may be bringing in Kareem Hunt to supplement while Alvin Kamara is out those 3 game suspension.
Yeah,
that's a big step.
An interesting fit.
That's a difference maker, and I think they could be in a position when the season comes. Now, Philly could do what they did last year. They didn't do anything to diminish their product. They actually got better, I think, especially on the defensive side of the football and younger. But I feel like there's a bit of a bounce back there. But it wouldn't surprise me if that team's 16-1 or 15-2, and then same type of thing. There's nothing that you can look at, I feel like, on that team and think that they're not in a better position from where they were last year, where they were, a couple plays away from being Super Bowl champs.
Tell people about the Straight Line podcast.
It's with the PointsBet Sportsbook, which will be, as we were just purchased by Fanatics for a measly sum of $225 million. But that should open up a lot of different possibilities for us in our show. It's a sports talk show is what it is. And when the season comes, it's what I did with my dad growing up. We sat at the counter. I talked football, and now I just do it in front of a camera for the delight of the TikTok and social media nation who loves to comment. I recently, this is true, New York Jets fans, I recently got 2 death threats from New York Jets fans because I said that they would not win the Super Bowl this year.
Wow.
And they just don't want somebody putting that mojo out into the universe, I guess. But I like what I get to do. It's allowed me to stay involved with the game. And so you can watch it on YouTube. Go to PointsBet Sportsbook YouTube channel, The Straight Line with Ryan Leaf. A lot of fun. We talk about everything from football to life to recovery. I mean, it's a pretty special show, and I'm really grateful for them to give me that opportunity.
Well, you do it well, and I'm grateful for you to come on our show and class it up here a little bit and take your time to be on Seahawks Forever. And again, I couldn't say it enough. As a former Coug, and just as a football fan and a fan of good people, it's really been cool watching your journey over the last 10, 12, 15 years, and really proud of you and where you're at. And thanks again for coming on. I really appreciate it, Ryan.
Love it, man. Murrow School of Communication. Got to stick together.
And, we talk about the death of the Pac-12 conference. I wonder how much longer schools of communication like that are going to exist, because just that, we could have a whole discussion about the changes in journalism and does that really even fit in with a collegiate curriculum? And because the things that Glenn Johnson taught me,
yep,
I don't see a lot of them being executed in today's journalistic world. So again, that's a whole nother discussion, but really, really appreciate your time. That's Ryan Leaf. I'm Dan Viens. Stay tuned this week. I'll have reaction to the Seahawks' first preseason game against the Vikings on Thursday. Matty Brown from the Seattle Overload podcast will be joining me tomorrow as well to break down some X's and O's, as only he does, the way he does it from across the pond. Until then, follow me on Twitter at Seahawks Forever, subscribe to the channel, and like this video. Forever and always, go Hawks.
Go Cougs!
There we go.